This video is brought to you by Atlas VPN. Oh, this one drives me nuts. I can already feel my diluted pizza blood boiling. Sometimes I feel as if the medieval period is one of the most misunderstood period of all. Oftentimes movies and sometimes video games, all of this sort of entertainment industry really misrepresents the medieval period. Preach it, my liege! The other day I was talking to my friend Martin, who really inspired me to make this rant, but I'll try to keep calm. I had pasta. Because whenever on this channel I talk about medieval knights or samurai or the ancient Roman soldiers, no problem. Everybody considers samurai to be like, wow, a samurai, oh yes, very highly trained, you know, you don't want to mess with a samurai. And now people finally understood that, you know, the medieval knight was not just a clanking tin can that couldn't move. Luckily we debunked that one. And when it comes to the ancient Romans, of course, apart from some people that say that ancient Rome doesn't exist, I would say that 99.9% of the population will agree that when you talk about a Roman soldier, you're talking about a professional soldier. But medieval soldiers, oh my goodness, if you don't believe me, if you think, oh, you're just building a strawman, yeah, a strawman, I'll show you a strawman. Just go check, just type, just Google it, Metatron, medieval soldier, and check the comments. The classic person that says, oh, but medieval soldiers, they're nothing, peasants with a pitchfork. Of course, on a battlefield you will see the difference between a medieval knight who's been training since he was frigging 7 and someone who's just been levied, although, you know, medieval campaigns could be very long, and I would imagine after a few battles and some battle experience you could consider some of these soldiers, even though they're not soldiers by profession necessarily, you know, whenever the campaign is over they just go back to their manual labor in the farm, they would still be button hardened. I think people really don't give enough credit to the physicality of not only farm hands, but also, you know, stable boys, or anyone who was working the fields, who worked physically. They walked everywhere because they couldn't afford horses. Woke up in the morning, went to the fields, used to operating all sorts of tools that they were using on a daily basis. These are people that are used to a very manual kind of labor. These would have been strong men, so whenever people say, oh, just a bunch of peasants, well, you know, I wouldn't want to fight one of those peasants. Particularly after you give him a helmet and a spear instead of a freaking pitchfork. Which I mean, the pitchfork. Oh, but how could they be strong men? We're talking about medieval peasants. The population was not well fed. Only the noblemen were well fed. The population, they were just eating slop or gruel, disgusting gruel. If that's what you've been told, you really need to go subscribe to Modern History TV, where my dear friend Jason Kingsley made 2 fantastic videos about medieval cuisine, where he talks about what a medieval peasant eats. And on this video, even though it's not a dedicated video to medieval cuisine, which I am producing, I will mention all of the different kinds of foods that were available to the medieval common man. But one thing I'm gonna say now, medieval farmers and peasants were very well fed, and that includes proteins. More on that later, to quote Lindy Beige. The third section of this video is probably going to be the most fun, because I'm going to talk about the way these people would fight. We're going to play around a little bit with my maces and with my newly acquired buckler, so definitely stick to the end of the video. But right now I'm going to take off this helmet, get comfortable, and tell you about the wonderful sponsor of this video. But now I'd like to take a moment to mention the kind sponsor of this video, Atlas VPN. Let's face it, in this new era of technology, all of us use the internet on a daily basis. And unfortunately, data theft, malicious links, malwares, trackers, there are all sorts of dangers out there for us internet users. And that's why you need a VPN. VPN means virtual private network, and the way it keeps you safe is by making all of your internet traffic travel through an encrypted tunnel. This way it protects you from spying, public Wi-Fi dangers, and hides your IP address and your online activities. But with Atlas VPN, you also get their data breach monitor, which is a security feature designed to track any data breaches related to your online accounts. It automatically scans leaked databases and informs you of any past or recent breaches where your personal information, such as your email address, username, passwords, social security numbers, were exposed. Another bonus feature has to do with online entertainment consumption, in other words, Netflix. Right now, as you probably know, I'm in the United States, but sometimes I get a little nostalgic of the European Netflix and the sort of shows that I was watching there, or the Japanese one. And with Atlas VPN, you can access all of those. Just open the Atlas VPN application and connect to the server of the country of which library you want to unlock. And boom, Netflix now thinks you are in their country and everything is available to you wherever you are. It also works on all devices, so one account for all. Right now, Atlas VPN is running a huge discount, a Christmas deal. You will get a 3-year subscription for only $1.39 a month. Let me say that again, $1.39 a month, with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So what are you waiting for? Click the link in the description right now. The offer is not gonna last long and you don't want to miss out. And big thanks to Atlas VPN for sponsoring my video. Welcome back. So that was a little bit of a bold statement. What do I mean by medieval peasants were generally speaking very well fed? When people work the land, they need energy, and in order to get that energy, they need to eat well. So this should really be common sense. And when it comes to availability of food, yes, there were some foods that only the noble could afford. Say, for example, sugar, particularly towards the beginning of the Middle Ages, all the way up to, I want to say, 1500s. Sugar was very expensive, so much so that it was considered a spice and was sometimes just sprinkled over stuff. When it comes to meat, the situation is very varied. Yes, expensive cuts of game for the nobles, chicken, generally speaking, for the nobles, but a lot of farmers had pigs and they would slaughter these pigs in winter and just make bacon and eat that. Sausages. And let's not forget fish as a form of protein. Salmon was readily available. Just go to the river and catch it, as Jason Kingsley eloquently pointed out in his video, together with his lovely guest. But cod, carp, these would be available. Now, pike as a fish for the aristocracy, although again, I'm kind of speaking very broadly here, and that's why I say I will make a dedicated video, because it really depends where in Europe we are talking about. For example, olive oil was a lot more common in southern Europe, particularly in Italy, whereas in the northern countries in Europe, they would rather use butter, for example, for frying. Milk was drank by the common people, whereas usually aristocracy would use it to cook it rather than directly drink it. And again, the upper class could also choose non-dairy products such as almond milk. Bread has been around forever. There is, of course, a difference in the way, for example, the ancient Romans produced bread and medieval people produced bread. Milling, leavening, and baking went through various stages of development over the centuries. In Roman times, water power was already used to grind flour, and by AD 1000, windmills began to appear. Very Age of Empires reminiscent, if you will. I freaking love that game. There were professional bakers even in ancient Egypt all the way back to 2000 BC. Bread was easily available. White bread would be for the aristocracy, whereas brown bread and wholemeal bread would be more for the poor. Interestingly enough. Of course, the difference between the bread used by the lower classes and the upper classes didn't only have to do with the fact that it was brown bread versus white bread, it's also the fact that the white bread used for the upper class would come from finest wheats. Still, the sort of white bread used by the medieval upper class would not be exactly like the white bread that we consume today, as at least it still contained the wheat germ that is normally removed from our modern white bread. Anyways, the coarser, the darker the bread, the lower class you were. But still, you had access to bread, and that's carbs. Beet was a staple of the lower classes. Lots of different kinds of kale were used. Of course, if you go to Italy instead, broccoli and cauliflower would be more used. And yet legumens of all kinds were eaten by the lower classes. And that's a lot of proteins for you there. Medieval society is complex. Clearly, in a situation of famine, you know, that would be different. But there wasn't always a famine in Europe. And in fact, even after the terrible Black Plague, or the spread of the infectious disease caused by the Yersinia pestis bacterium at the end of the 1300s, there was more free land, there wasn't too much space, there was less competition for space, you could ask for more money because there was a demand for new working hands. A medieval peasant won't be able to afford rabbit or hare meat. That would be too expensive, but they could still be well fed. Now let's talk about the man at arms. People think that a man at arms is just, again, a peasant that has been drafted. Give him a helmet, give him a broken shield, send him to the field, just a grunt that is gonna get killed, he doesn't know what he's doing. And this image has been popularized also by games that I love. Bretonia for Warhammer Fantasy. For those of you who are my age, you know what I'm talking about. I'm gonna show you what men at arms men-at-arms are in a Bretonnian army, and then we can talk about what they actually were in the medieval period. For the Bretonnians, they're exactly described as that. They are peasants just mashed together. A medieval men-at-arms were men that fought in the manner of the knight. And a lot of the knights that we see in the medieval iconography are actually men-at-arms, as it's explained by Dr. Tobias Capwell in his book. Some men-at-arms were wearing full plate armor. But even if we just talk about levied infantry, yes, the average levied, drafted medieval soldier is not going to be as trained as an ancient Roman professional soldier. But there are exceptions to this. Say, for example, late medieval pikemen, extremely highly disciplined troops. You had medieval mercenary soldiers, and again, like for example the Genoese crossbowmen, very specialized kinds of troops. And if we really want to make it wide, what about archers, like the English longbowmen, working in a village, and yet they were extremely highly trained in the usage of the bow because it was mandatory by law in Britain, also because it takes years to train archers in the proper usage of a war bow. And ultimately you've got the Italian condottieri, another kind of medieval mercenary force with troops that will have been trained to a certain degree. Not as trained as the ancient Romans. We'll have to wait to the early modern period to reach that kind of level of professionalism, but that doesn't mean that medieval troops were a bunch of idiots that didn't know what they were doing. When it comes to the way medieval infantry fought, this is my opinion, and I would love to hear what Matt Easton has to say, for example, on this, since he knows a lot more than I do on this kind of topic. But my opinion is, if you compare the way a regular medieval levied soldier were to fight, then it's never going to be as sophisticated as the sort of medieval fighting treatises that we know are associated with the upper class and aristocracy. But then again, when we're talking about melee, when we're talking about battlefield warfare and combat, not all of your soldiers need to be extremely highly trained duelists in order for you to win. Numbers are extremely important, luck is important, the weather conditions, who is attacking, who is defending, a surprise factor, how skilled the commander is, of course weapons and armor, army distribution, mounted troops, infantry, cavalry, ranged, people being outsmarted because of tactics, strategy, money, general morale. As long as you make sure that your soldiers can work as a cohesive unit, at the end of the day, block, riposte, don't run away, I think that's gonna be enough. In the movies we see a lot of running and charging of infantry, but in reality I want to say most battles were formation slowly advancing and then trying to overcome each other. But what do you think? What is your take on all of this? Have you ever heard this kind of discussion of people just saying, oh, medieval soldiers are just peasants with pitchforks, they're just idiots, they didn't know what they were doing? What is your opinion? And make sure you don't forget to check out Atlas VPN and the link in the description to make use of their amazing Christmas offer. Thank you very much for watching, and remember, the Metatron has spread his wings. Goodbye. Rome exists.